knock yourself out, South Australia?
You maybe need to bring some officials to the table. I'm interested in the flows into South Australia at present, your modelling, and any possible medium and long-term implications either for infrastructure or the health of the river. Not just immediately, so immediate assessment and then maybe some potential issues that we need to observe going forward.
Thank you, Senator. Andrew McConvill, Chief Executive of the MDBA. I'll ask Mr Reynolds, Head of River Operations, to come forward as well. So we're certainly seeing very high flows over the border at South Australia at the moment. They are likely to increase from water that was really entered into the system several weeks ago. So yeah, we're likely to see that not peak until around December. But Andrew?
Andrew Reynolds, Executive Director, River Management. Flows across the border are currently just above 90,000 megalitres a day. We've been working with the Bureau to model anticipated flows. Current projections are that the river could get to somewhere around 165,000 megalitres a day at the border late this calendar year. But those projections are changing as we continue to get more and more rain into the system. And they've been progressively increasing over recent times. In terms of the impact of that, we're certainly seeing widespread flooding right across the basin, not just into South Australia. That is causing a number of impacts. Of course, there's the disruption to communities through flooding and impact on infrastructure and the like. There's also an emerging blackwater, so low oxygen blackwater issue right across the basin. As water moves across the floodplains, picks up organic material which breaks down, that consumes oxygen out of the water and can lead to the dissolved oxygen levels getting so low that fish and other aquatic organisms can't survive. We certainly see that as an emerging risk, and it's likely that we will see some fish deaths in many parts of the basin. That said, those blackwater events and that movement of organic carbon into the river system is a positive for the environment. It supports a broader food web. So in the longer term, it's a natural occurrence and it does have some positive benefits, but there are immediate impacts. The water that's moving through the system, and you asked specifically about South Australia, will take many weeks to move down through the system. The river will be very high, floodplain inundated in the South Australian riverland and further down well into the next calendar year, I would imagine.
From a South Australian perspective, what should we be looking for as a challenge of this water coming into our particular part of the system?
Certainly there will be disruption to roads and transport networks. There will be properties on the floodplain, shacks and other properties that potentially could be inundated. There's a lot of work that the South Australian government's initiated now to enhance levee systems and ensure that levees that have been built some decades ago are in reasonable condition to have this floodwater against them. One of the fortunate things is the water does move through the system slowly, and so for South Australia you can see this water coming over many weeks before it arrives, so there is an opportunity to prepare for it.
Have you formed a view that if the highest levels come through as potentially projected, depending on the weather, are there any long-term implications for the river system in my state? I'm not binding you, but obviously you're turning your organisation is turning its mind to it.
Yeah, I think with the flows that we are expecting to see, we certainly would anticipate some significant scouring of sand at the Murray mouth and some refreshing of the Murray mouth. At the moment, we've stood down the dredges that were operating there. That was from the last week of October, and we don't anticipate them being reinstated. But we continue to survey the mouth on a regular basis to see how much scouring is occurring. The flow at the end of the system has not reached these peak levels yet. Yes. It's certainly got some time before it makes its way through the system, and we'll need to observe what actually occurs. We don't anticipate significant damage to river infrastructure as a result of these flows. The infrastructure is designed to be submerged if flows get really high and the like. So, but there will be extensive clean-up and reinstatement to be done, and I would expect that there would be damage to road infrastructure and the like, but the South Australian Government would be much better positioned to comment on that than the MDBA.
Leaving aside the Murray Mouth and maybe not needing to dredge, are there any potential long-term impacts for the river, positive or negative, from a South Australian perspective, given this flow of water, or does it just come through slowly, impact certain areas, and then we get back to normal?
The floodplains in South Australia will benefit significantly from an environmental perspective from these flows. There are areas of the floodplain that will not have had water on it for many decades or several decades that will be inundated by this. Vegetation will respond, fish will respond through being able to get out of the floodplains. The Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder could probably speak to many of those environmental outcomes better than I could, but certainly the inundation of the floodplain is a positive thing for the environment, and these flows will definitely do that.
I'm just interested in how long the positive impact lasts. For example, you're looking at 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. I appreciate it's a difficult question because you could have drought and other weather events, but there must be sort of a general indicator. If all things being equal, you're expecting like a 5-year benefit or a 2-year benefit?
I think the benefits would extend far beyond that for some areas of the higher parts of the floodplain that haven't seen water for potentially a couple of 2 or 3 decades. This inundation will provide significant benefits for them and sustain things like black blocks communities for a decade or more. But the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder could probably speak to those issues much.
I'll ask him those questions a little bit later. So, in event of your modelling, just the sequence of the modelling rather than the outcome of the modelling, so we wait for these flows to dissipate, and then that gets fed into your modelling, into not only the health of the river, but obviously the needs, the environmental needs, the water holder needs. What's the sort of sequencing from the plan's perspective? Or they just update it? I mean, you're updating it monthly, 6 monthly. When, for example, as a senator, when do I ask you about the after effects of the river in relation to your modelling? 6 months, 12 months? When do I come back and make my further inquiries?
I'm probably not the person to be speaking to the modelling of those environmental outcomes.
Yeah, I think maybe, Senator, 2 points. One is the environmental outcomes. Second, I think your question might be going to what does that mean for the sustainable diversion limits?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I might ask Mr Goods to come over.
I appreciate it's early days, so I'm not trying to know your colours to the mast on this one. It's just, I'm interested in just the sequencing of your processes, and then I can time those with my own estimate inquiries.
Dr Coleman.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator. Dr Matthew Coleman, Head of Applied Science at the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. So just to clarify your question, you're interested to know when an event like this would be incorporated in our modelling or our decision-making?
Yes, and how it then informs your view.
Thank you, Senator. So our models are updated fairly regularly to incorporate evolving conditions. So it tends to depend on the model updates are driven by whatever the policy and planning and decision-making needs are. And so our next major decision milestone is the Basin Plan Review in 2026. So at the moment we're going through an update process with the Basin states to update our models based on the best information we have. It's not yet clear how far we'll extend the modelling period, but what we'll look to do is to update the models so they do incorporate, so they move beyond the 2009 end date that was used in the previous Basin Plan, and we'll update them as far as we can for that 2026 decision-making milestone. As for whether this event is included or not, there hasn't yet been a decision about how far we'll go forward, but we'll definitely update the models for 2020 and likely beyond that for Basin Plan review purposes.
Do you make an assessment whether it's so significant? I'm thinking from a South Australian perspective. I appreciate for the river system as a whole, it's different. Make an assessment that's so significant, therefore it is a major variable in the model. That decision's yet to come, I assume.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of considerations there.
Yes.
So one of the major considerations is whether we have information on the flows that we can trust, whether they're credible enough and they're being quality assured enough to be included in the models. But one thing we will do is as part of the Basin Plan review and the Basin Plan evaluation in 2025, we'll include this flow event in those considerations through our monitoring work, so monitoring where the flows have gone and what the environmental benefit has been from this type of flow. So that'll be, if it's not included in the modelling, it will definitely be included in our monitoring evaluation work for 2025 and 2026.
Thank you. I'll hand back to you, Chair.